All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are decoding global sentiment. We're going to be looking at a single week's worth of data from prediction markets to get a real sense of what the crowd thinks is just around the corner. I mean, think about it. What if you had a kind of data-driven crystal ball? That's really what we're looking at here. We're tapping into the wisdom, or, maybe the collective madness of the crowd by seeing where people are putting their actual money on the line. So let's see what the data is telling us. So first things first, what are we even talking about? Well, a prediction market is basically a place where you can bet on future events. If you think something's going to happen, you buy yes shares. If you don't, you buy no shares. The cool part is the price of a share, say 70 cents, translates directly to a 70% probability. It's a really fascinating way to see what thousands of people are thinking in real time. Now, here's a key idea we have to understand: notional volume. This isn't just about how many people are betting. It's about how much money is on the table. A really high notional volume means there's a ton of capital behind a prediction. You can think of it as a measure of conviction. It shows us which questions the market thinks are the most important ones to answer. Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with economic forecasts. Then we'll jump into the always exciting political arena. After that, we'll take a look at tech's future. And finally, we'll wrap up by seeing where the market's conviction is the absolute strongest. First up, the economy. Money talks, and in these markets, it's forecasting everything from what the Fed's going to do to what the price of gas will be. This gives you a pretty good snapshot of the overall economic mood. The big takeaway: the market's pretty sure the Fed is going to start cutting rates next year, even if they hold steady in December. But there's one question in particular that has attracted just a massive amount of financial interest. And here it is: over $12 million. That is a huge amount of money, all wagered on one single question. How many times will the Fed cut interest rates in 2025? That kind of volume tells you that this is one of the most critical questions for anybody thinking about financial strategy in the year ahead. But here's the kicker. While all that money is certain that cuts are coming, it's completely torn on how many. The odds for 2 cuts versus 3 cuts? It's basically a coin flip. So the market is screaming that a change in direction is coming, but it's deeply, deeply uncertain about the specifics. And that's where all the risk and opportunity live. Now, let's contrast that total uncertainty with a market where the conviction became almost absolute. At the start of the week, people were already feeling really confident, like 91% sure that gold was going to outperform Bitcoin this year. And then, by the end of the week, that confidence just exploded to 99%. What started as a very strong belief turned into a near certainty. And that rapid shift in opinion is a really powerful signal about how sentiment is strengthening for traditional assets over crypto in this climate. All right, let's shift gears and head into the political arena. This is a place where sentiment can flip on a dime, sometimes based on a single headline or even just a rumor. So we start our week on November 13th with this major political question hanging in the air. The market priced the odds of Trump releasing any Epstein files at just 47%. It was a total toss-up. Nobody had any real clue which way it was going to go. Now, fast forward just 6 days later, and that probability has just skyrocketed to 76%. Now, we don't know the exact reason why, but it's obvious the market reacted to some kind of new information that week. And that is a massive swing in sentiment on a very sensitive topic. So just to sum that up, this market went from a total coin flip to what's now seen as a highly probable event in less than 7 days. It is a perfect example of just how quickly the political landscape can be totally reshaped. And just like we saw with the economy, you have to look where the big money is flowing. We're talking about over $28 million being wagered on who the Democratic nominee will be in 2028. I mean, that's incredible. It shows a huge amount of capital being put to work trying to forecast the future of politics years and years in advance. Okay, on to our third section, technology. And what the data shows here are really 2 very different stories. On one hand, you've got this growing confidence in AI, and on the other, you have a lot of growing pessimism in the world of crypto. Let's start with AI. At the beginning of the week, Google's Gemini was already the clear favorite. But by the end of the week, its probability just jumped from 78% to 90%. In that same time, the market for ChatGPT as a serious contender basically evaporated, and a new one for Grok opened way, way behind at 6%. The sentiment is crystal clear. The market sees Gemini just running away with the race. Now, let's flip over to crypto, where the mood was, well, a lot more negative. Across the board, we saw traders start to bet on lower and lower prices for major cryptocurrencies, which effectively lowered the perceived safety net for all these assets. And this comparison right here illustrates that trend perfectly. On November 13th, the big question was whether Ethereum would fall below $3,000. By the 19th, the entire conversation had shifted. The new question was whether it would fall below $2,500. The whole frame of reference just moved downward, which is a textbook sign of growing bearish sentiment. So, after looking at all this change and all this uncertainty, let's finish up by looking at the exact opposite. Where does the market show the strongest agreement? What outcomes are being treated as near certainties? This is a really powerful summary right here. The market is pricing 4 key events with over a 90% probability. There's a 99% chance gold beats Bitcoin, a 98% probability that Blue Origin's new rocket finally launches, a 96% conviction that Elon Musk stays the world's wealthiest person, and a near certainty that Google will release Gemini 3.0. These are the big bets where the crowd has pretty much reached a verdict. And that really brings us to the most crucial point. When you follow the money, you find it gathering around the most important questions. We saw over 28 million on the 2028 election, 12 million on Fed policy, and nearly 9 million on the AI race. That notional volume really is a map of what the market thinks matters most. So, we've seen where the wisdom of the crowd is pointing. We've watched sentiment shift and solidify and even split apart. The data gives us a pretty clear forecast. But, prediction markets aren't prophecy. And that leaves us with the ultimate strategic question, the one that really matters. Where is the crowd wrong?